Hello, Jeff Rolke here. This is questions from comments 39. Some very interesting questions here. Getting a little bit further afield, perhaps. Maybe a little bit more esoteric. Really great topics to cover. Still very much germane to the practice of singing and performing and all of that. So I'm going to dive right in. Thank you if you've chosen to subscribe. If you haven't yet, I hope you'll do so now. If you're wondering about how to get involved in the questions from comments videos, all you have to do is leave a comment somewhere on the video. You could leave a comment down here if you have a question, or you could leave a comment on a video that you happen to be watching or working with. One of my videos. I don't go looking on other people's videos to get questions to answer. But you could leave a comment someplace, and sometimes I just answer them right there in the comment section, but sometimes I grab them. Increasingly, I'm finding just interesting reflections, as you'll see in this questions from comments, by people who've watched a video and had some really intriguing thoughts about it or about their practice in general, and I've thought that it was a good idea to share it here. There's one in here that I think is really, really great. So let's dive in. Thanks again. If you want to support my channel, all that kind of stuff's in the description. First question. Do you know and can recommend singers from popular genres that sound around the bass fach? I find really hard to sing along with singers without having to sing an octave lower. My favorite ones don't go as low as I would want, which are Mark Sandman from the band Morphine and Lehonard Cohen, which his voice got better and lower with time, being at the best in its two last albums. Thanks for everything. This is a really challenging question because in the popular genres, there aren't that many bass vocalists out there making it happen. The one reference that you mentioned here that immediately comes to mind is the vocalist from Crash Test Dummies. He had, and then this goes way, way back, but they had a very, very popular song. This would have been back in the early 90s, I think, and did very, very well. He has a very profoundly low voice. What you will often find with bass vocalists is that they will go from singing in their full bass quality voices and then using a lot of kind of head voice falsetto types of affectations to sing in registers that you find more commonly being used in the popular genres. Barry White is another vocalist who has since passed away, but he also sang in this very, very profoundly low, sultry area. There just, I'm afraid, aren't that many that are out there and have had really recorded success and were very, very aware of their materials. Now, what you might consider doing is changing the keys of the songs that you wish to sing. Now, that's not going to help you if you want to or need to sing along with the vocalist that you're listening to. If you want to sing along with them, then you might have a look at Crash Test Dummies and see where that vocalist has gone on from there. You might have a listen to Barry White, see if his music is something that you can enjoy and sing along with. But if you learn to do some transposition, then you can take any melody and any song and move it to a key that's appropriate for your voice, for your registration events, for the characteristics that you have. It really does help you make the song your own. So have a listen to Crash Test Dummies, see what you think, hope you like it. Seems silly to me that I didn't take the time to just look up Brad Roberts' voice. Brad Roberts is the vocalist from Crash Test Dummies. They're still touring, so you could in fact go and see them and sing along with them live if you wanted to. You can also look to see what other projects he may be involved in or have been involved in, and maybe find some music there that you want to sing along with or that works for you in your vocal range. I hope that helps. This video is one of the best videos on this platform, probably. Thanks for that, appreciate it. But I do have a question or two. When my ribcage expands, it doesn't really look like it expands as much as yours does in the example. I am a smaller person with a smaller frame and could be described as skinny fat. So maybe that's why I can't see it as well. But I feel them moving when I breathe in. How much are they supposed to move out? Mine essentially expand far out enough to be perpendicular with the floor. Does that sound about right? I'll handle the second half of that question in a moment here. This person left this question on one of my earlier questions from comments videos, I believe number 6. I'll put a link here in the cards. And in the video, I'm wearing this really tight shirt and I'm just focused on my rib cage and I'm showing the expansion and engagement and all those kinds of things. Again, link on screen. In the beginning, a small amount of expansion is better, so long as it's done laterally, than a lot of expansion where you're kind of pushing and forcing and the shoulders and chest are moving all over the place and things like that. Like anything, start with a little bit, and as you continue to get familiar with the process, your expansion will grow. Usually, we only expand a small amount in the beginning because we're tensing up other muscles that don't really need to be engaged for this process. So over time, we learn to release that muscle control and we'll get more and more expansion. Also, another vocal coach who advocates for arpeggio on this website relates the feeling of engagement to blowing up a balloon. Do you think that's a good analogy for the engagement portion when singing? Thank you for the video, Jeff. Really elucidates a lot of issues I've had with breathing while singing. Arpeggio changed everything for me. If you've heard me talk about arpeggio before, you've heard me say that. It remains true. It remains one of the most profound adjustments to my technique and long-reaching and impactful that I've ever done. So I'm a big advocate for arpeggio breath management. The balloon thing is tricky because the perception of physical sensation is subjective. What blowing up a balloon feels like to you may, quite likely, feels very different to what blowing up a balloon feels like to me. But one part about that I think is really interesting is if you've ever blown up a balloon and you hold it still. So you've got it, pretty well filled, but you're neither putting more air into the balloon, you're also not letting it come out. And if you can feel the throat open, that is in fact a very good replication of what the suspension feels like. Now, when you are suspended in arpeggio, you're not getting that back pressure. There's no great, because what you're doing with a balloon is you're creating an artificially high pressure zone that's pressing back, and that's giving you something to push against. And you don't have that in quite the same way when you're singing in the open air. Certainly there's pressure, we're always under air pressure, but it's not that extra pressure of the pressurized balloon. But that does resonate quite well with me. That feeling of suspension that you get in arpeggio kind of feels like that to me. Again, the descriptions of physical sensations are subjective. That may resonate with you. The best way to find out if it's right is to get with a coach who teaches arpeggio, have them evaluate your technique, and then try it with the balloon and ask them, do I look like I'm using my frame, my body, my expansion and engagement correctly in these moments? And if they say, yes, it appears that is the case, then you will then know that you're doing the technique properly and that description of that physical sensation is accurate for you. This is 100% true, and even though I'm very new to doing any kind of performances, I learned in my first couple that I would have liked to be slightly better prepared than I was. I really will never forget that feeling that if only I had put in a few more hours, I could be a little more free and enjoy the experience that much more. That drives me every time now to not be underprepared. That was a comment left on a short that I did talking about building confidence. And what they're responding to is what I think is a kind of unpopular viewpoint, which is that if you didn't do your preparations properly for the performance, then you shouldn't expect to feel confident about it, basically, right? And by doing your preparations, I'm talking about having workshopped the melody of your song, having memorized the lyrics and the melody of your song, known all rhythmical cues and counts and things like that so that you know when your entrances are. If you have done those things, then if you are still feeling a lack of confidence or performance anxiety, then perhaps it's best to look at some other aspects to your performance practices. Why might you be feeling that way? I often talk about this as sort of turning it inwards and looking at what might be bringing up that conflicting viewpoint, that I call it in myself the saboteur, that idea that I'm not capable or not good enough, or I don't belong here, or no one wants to listen to me. Those are the kinds of things that I hear in my head. That's the way my performance anxiety presents itself. But if I haven't done my practice, if I haven't truly prepared the material adequately, then I shouldn't be surprised when performance anxiety and lack of confidence really present themselves well. And that's what that comment is in response to. So yes, I think that is the case. We have to prepare well, and out of that preparation, our confidence unfolds, and we find more reasons to be confident and to also challenge that crosstalk, the saboteur, those conflicting viewpoints that create performance anxiety in us. By the hard part, do you mean the hard part of a given song? For me, that would be the big high note. Seems that this is better approached later when fully warmed up. Or do you mean the piece as a whole that you want to work on the least? But no, you have to. Part of identifying the hard part is not just looking at that big high note and saying, oh, that's going to be rough. Part of doing the hard work of that is taking it incrementally so that you are not just trying to do whatever on this one big high note, but taking it as an incremental process. So if you have a high part like that, then you might need to transpose it to a different key in order to work out the lyrical phrasing for it, or learn the intervals of the melody so that you're not tackling both those intervals and the registration events if it's a really high section. You might have to do that and then slowly work it up to the performance key. You might have to do that section with a solid vowel in a lower key to work out the phrasing and get the flow of the vowel correct across all the interval skips and melody as they're presented in the tune, and then move that up to performance key. And the same thing again if it has a lot of different words in it and you need a lot of vowel changes, checking your vowel alignment through the vowels without the consonants and then moving it up to the performance key also may need to be done if the part is truly that challenging. That, to me, is how we'd work on that. Now, it's worth mentioning too here, part of doing that work is making sure that you're warmed up before you do it. So you have to exercise judgment in this. If you're looking at this and saying, this is the hard part of my song, it's a big high note, well, go and warm up. That's part of the process of working on a high tessitura passage. I would never suggest that you just blindly or coldly go into it and try to do that. No, the process of warming up is part of that process. It's part of that work of tackling the hard thing first. I appreciate that opportunity to clarify this, and I would also appreciate you for the way that you've brought a bigger idea, which is really what I was getting after in that short. And that's the idea that the hard part is different for each of us. For some people, working on that high passage will be the hard part, and they'll have to do all of those steps and go through that process. For other people, it'll be something else. Maybe it's just finding time to practice. The hard part is different for all of us. We have to identify what that is, and then I would advocate for tackling it first. The point is that we want to remove these obstacles from our path. We don't want to obsess over one thing for such a long time that it prevents us from doing all sorts of other steps that would move our career forward. Great question. Thank you for the opportunity to offer some clarification here. I also have a question. Some people say that it's better to breathe through the nose while singing, but it's so difficult. What do you think about it? Some exercises, the thing about breathing through the nose is that some exercises we want to do that because we're trying to maintain a neutral facial posture throughout the duration of the exercise. So for example, if you're humming something, and even my lips parted on the very first one, and I was like, oh yeah, I gotta breathe through my nose. If we are habitually moving our jaw, then that bears looking into. That is tension. And generally speaking, we want to reduce tension as much as we can. This is not because we're going to sing slack-jawed and without any facial expression. It's so that we remain flexible as we can, to move from one position to another, from one consonant shape to another, from one facial expression to another. If every time I breathe, I have to pop my jaw open, then I am limiting my ability to be as flexible as I can. So some exercises, breathing through the nose, helps us evaluate how much release we are maintaining or if we have any habitual movements. Not wanting to do it because it's hard, I understand that. It's nice to avoid things that are challenging, and yet I would argue that there are things to be learned. If, for example, you find it difficult because your jaw always wants to pop open when you take a breath, well, that's reason enough to slow the exercises down, take your time, and be very deliberate about the process. So instead of trying to keep a tempo, try taking your time. See if you can stop the flow of air and stop singing. Consciously take the breath through the nose and then start the phrase again. This may mean, if you don't play any instruments, this may mean like kind of riding the pause button on a video. I might also suggest a video that I did some time ago, which could probably use a little update. And I called it Slow and Fast. And I go through exercises just like that, very, very slowly. If I remember, I'll put a link in the cards. That would be a great one to maybe try that with. And I think we have one more question. I was wondering if it's possible to do some lessons on growth of voices. I might argue that my whole channel is kind of about the growth of voices, but not quite in the way that, well, you'll see. Let's say I am a mezzo-soprano and I want to know what more lessons I can do to achieve more and more better to sopranos. Now, presumably what they mean is they want to be or sing like a soprano. Or if an alto were wanting to go from alto to soprano, what lessons will they do? Let's take a look at the piano for a second here, because voices don't work quite like that, but that doesn't mean you can't sing in the various ranges that you're referring to. So this is C5. D5, believe it or not, is the alto, contralto, secondo passaggio, the registration event, much higher than is generally thought of, because too frequently this kind of area doesn't get developed in those voices. Here's where the mezzo-soprano, secondo passaggio, typically is, and sopranos will be somewhere right there with their secondo passaggio. Now it's worth mentioning that in every voice, they could be a little bit one direction or another. Our voices are built to our standards, not the piano standards. We don't conform to Western tonal music. So it's entirely plausible that your voice be in the cracks somewhere. That's totally normal. That's, you know, we're built to our own standards. Now, the alto who develops technique to sing beyond this will then very quickly get into ranges where they're accustomed to hearing sopranos. And it's feasible to acquire quite a lot of this area as an alto or contralto vocalist. That, of course, means that the contralto could have a ridiculously massive range. I mean, talk about tessitura. That's unbelievably beautiful and amazing to think about, right? Like all that space. But that requires quite a lot of technique through this area. The point here is that you're not becoming a soprano. You're singing notes that sopranos do sing from time to time, and you can acquire quite a lot of that range. Now, you may not see a C6, it's only just here within the frame. And you may not necessarily see beyond that, higher up, that sopranos will occasionally find their way to. But you can acquire quite a lot of that range, but the fundamental function of your voice will remain the same. That is a physical attribute to your voice. That is the way that it is built. The same thing is true for tenors and baritones. Most tenors, so this is C4, middle C, most tenors will find that they've got their secondo passaggio somewhere in this range, this F, G thing area here. And baritones will find that they're somewhere in this D, E flat range. Now, if they learn to make a good transition across the secondo passaggio, those baritone vocalists can acquire quite a significant portion of that range that the tenor tends to inhabit. But that doesn't make them tenors. It just means that they've learned to make a good transition and they have acquired that range. If they want to masquerade as a tenor, which baritones do to great effect, I might add, then they will learn to emulate the tonal characteristics of the tenor range vocalist. Again, if they want to do that. I'm not saying they have to. I'm not saying it's recommended, but if you wanted to do that, it's entirely feasible. That too brings up a really beautiful and wide range potential for this vocalist. That baritone vocalist quite likely will have this G2, and they could very, I don't necessarily say easily, but it is entirely plausible to have that A right there, maybe even this C5, though that's going to really get quite demanding. And again, we've got this 2 octave and a 4th range right there. Truly flexible, amazing, beautiful amount of tessitura to have to work with. So if you want to have a voice that spans a wider tessitura, work on your registration events. If you want to sound like a different fach, know that you can't become that fach. Your voice is what it is. I would encourage you to enjoy it, revel in it for what it is. But what you can do is listen to the tonal characteristics that those fachs emulate in various ranges. You must be very specific, like look at the piano, look at where they are and the tonal characteristics, and then you can try to emulate those characteristics. They may be slightly in conflict with the nature of your fach. That doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means that it may take some practice and some delicate work with some patience and time. I do hope that helps. I love the questions. I love the thoughts. Thank you so much. If you have any follow-up questions, please drop them in the comments. Thank you if you've chosen to subscribe. You can find other ways to support my channel. Those are in the description, and they do include Patreon, where you can get MP3s of these chats. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching. One more time, my name is Jeff. Take really good care of your voices, enjoy singing, and hopefully we'll see you again. Bye.